The Canadian men's U20 team have made it past the group stage onto the quarterfinals where they will take on Panama. And if they win that match, they will qualify for the U20 World Cup for the very first time in 17 years. So, Alex, what we are going to do today is we are going to reflect on the group stage. It was an impressive showing by Canada. They had 2 wins, 1 draw, 0 losses, taking 7 of a possible 9. What were your thoughts on the group stage?
Yeah, overall, it was almost perfect for Canada, at least in terms of results. Really, it makes that first Honduras game hurt a little more that Canada led 2-0 because that win could have gotten them a potentially easier quarterfinal matchup. Panama is going to be a tough game, but there aren't really many easy games in this tournament for Canada, and they kind of learned that. So the fact that they emerged with 3 results, there were no losses. They showed some good character in the results, such as the late winner against El Salvador. That was encouraging, as well. Against the Dominican Republic, it was not an easy game. They had to grind, they had to work for their win in that. I think overall this group showed some character amid some, so the pitch was rough, the
Yeah.
weather was horrible throughout all the tournament. Who would have thought a tournament in Mexico? You would have thought
Yeah.
it's sunny and hot, but no, it's raining and muddy and in a tough environment. And I think most importantly, we learned a lot about some of these younger players who potentially down the road could represent the senior men's national team. And that's the big goal from this tournament. But of course, you do want to go to a World Cup because that sort of stuff can help players. It can be a moment to remember. And now Canada just 1 game away, and they've put themselves in a pretty decent position.
Yeah, 1 game away, and they should feel pretty confident going into that match. It was tough, like you mentioned, that first game against Honduras. They were up 2-0, and they gave up that late one, so it does sting a bit. But overall, I thought they bounced back great to pick up those 2 wins, got 7 of 9, like we mentioned. And I think they're going to be, honestly, it's going to be a good game because that Panama team does look really good. They were in a group with Mexico where they had 7 points as well, but Mexico had the better goal difference, so they topped the group. So, Alex, like you mentioned, some of these young players were definitely standouts throughout this group stage. So let's take a look at 3, and there's only one place to start, and that is Santiago Lopez, who has been incredible. As soon as we have watched him play for the U20s, he's been scoring goals, he's been creating, and he's continued this on in this tournament right now. He has 2 goals and 2 assists, and I think the thing I like about him the most is that it looks like he wants to take on the responsibility. He looks like he always wants the ball. He's always looking to create. He doesn't overthink. If there's a pass to play, he does it, but he's got no problem taking it on himself. And he's just given a little bit of everything. And he's by far, I think, one of the most exciting talents that we have right now coming up. And I definitely at some point would like to see him maybe get a look from the national team, maybe at one of the upcoming windows, maybe against Mexico in the upcoming friendly. It would be an interesting one because he's a dual national. But Alex, how impressed have you been with Santiago Lopez?
Yeah, I mean, where to start? You can talk about his consistency, the fact that he got a goal contribution in every game, and Canada scored 5 goals. Santiago Lopez directly involved in 4 of them. That's quite impressive. You can talk about his mentality, just the way he's a scrapper out there. Like he kind of has a bit of that chip on his shoulder, but obviously he's a skilled player. You'd see it. He'd try back heels. He'd try shots from distance. He'd try creative passes, and for the most part a lot of them would come off. So I think for him, those are all impressive things that he kind of does. He plays without fear. He plays that sort of fun, exciting game, but he's also consistent, right? He chips in big moments, and it felt like he really rose to the occasion in this group stage. His team he needed a bit of a leader offensively, and clearly is a lot through Santiago Lopez. He started every game. He hardly came off the field. That sort of energy is respectable. So Santiago Lopez, definitely a name that between qualifiers and now this tournament, he's shown that he can be a potentially fascinating player too. And what's another thing is we just don't, we don't know what he can be yet just because he's so flexible. That's exciting because he can play striker, he can play winger, he can play kind of as a 10. There's kind of like a blank slate there in terms of figuring out what his best position is as a player, but he has a lot of tools to be an interesting player all over the pitch.
So he's wearing the number 7, and like you mentioned, Alex, you don't really know maybe where this player is going to grow into. I kind of see him as like an Antoine Griezmann role, playing a little bit under the striker, Paulo Dybala as well, having the ability just to kind of drift into where he wants because he's a special talent, and I can't wait to see the way that he can develop over the next few years. The second player we're going to look at, and Alex, you have a player comparison as well from the Vancouver Whitecaps too, Jivan Bodwell, which had a fantastic tournament, I think, so far. And you gave him some high praise, Alex, in the midfield, and you have a player that you're going to compare him to. But I think Badwell's been great. I think he's been great, similar to Lopez through the qualifiers into the tournament. Just brings a little bit of everything in that midfield, and I think he pairs really well with Biello. So why don't you tell me a little bit about him throughout his tournament so far and the player that you're comparing him to?
I mean, Bodwell is just so impressive because His work rate, first off, is commendable. Like he puts in a shift defensively, but watch him off the ball. He makes an incredible amount of runs, and like he hardly came off the field. And by like the third game was like 80th minute, he's still making these late runs in the box. And what's impressive is that it's hard sometimes for kids his age. He makes a lot of unselfish off the ball runs where he'll make a run and he knows he's not getting the ball, but he'll open up space. And he's so good at playing 1-2s, and probably his best skill is just his ability to get open. It reminds me a lot in terms of like just a style comp, of course. Make sure that keep this straight. It's not like a level comp. Who knows? Maybe one day he gets close to that, but that would just be unfair expectations. But stylistically, it reminds me so much of Andres Iniesta, right? The Barcelona midfielder who is so good at just finding space, making runs, creative on the ball, comfortable going out wide, comfortable playing inside. Even Bodwell stylistically reminds me so much of that. That's the way he gets on the ball, finds space. And he's also like very good on the ball. Like look at that pass he played in the El Salvador game where it was a 1-2 and he dinks it right over the top, leading to the goal. Perfect pass. There's several other moments too where the ball would come to him at the edge of the box. He'd make a little perfect ball over the top. He'd make a through ball. Like he kind of has that final third ability, but then he does use so much for you on the ball with his running. And also another underrated skill for a midfielder, he also knows when to pick his moments. Like sometimes he'll try to dribble through two or three guys. He'll try to hit the switch and succeed, but he also knows when to get the ball. Don't like what you're seeing. Go back, go side, and that's kind of where I see that maturity of an Iniesta-like player, where sometimes Iniesta would pull off the spectacular, but also he knew when to play it simple, and that's what I really like about Badwall's game.
Yeah, Badwall's been having a great season with the Whitecaps too. They were in great form leading into this tournament. He's continued that on, and I definitely think he's going to be one for the future for the Vancouver Whitecaps when he eventually cracks that first team. Our third player and our final stand-up player we are going to focus on is Gregoire Zwiderski. Now, unfortunately, throughout this tournament so far, he's had a lot on his mind, considering that his club team Bordeaux has folded, which means that he will become a free agent, and now he's going to use this tournament as an opportunity to potentially impress. Find maybe a suitor in Europe. Maybe he'll come back to North America. I don't know. But I think that he's been fantastic throughout this tournament. I think he's been excellent. He's come up with some massive, massive saves. I know he'd be disappointed with the Honduras game and the late goal, but I don't honestly put down either one of those goals on him. He did his job getting that first save, and the rebound was just a little unfortunate. But time and time again, every time that there's an opportunity where you're looking for someone to step up big at the back, it is Zwiderski. He's been great. Alex, what do you think?
It just looks like a calm, reliable shot stopper. He's made some huge saves. Yeah, like you mentioned, they've only allowed 3 goals, and hard to look at any of them and think he could have done much better. And especially considering the conditions he's had to play in, rainy, muddy, not easy for a goalkeeper. You kind of get worried every time the ball goes up. Is it going to slip out of his gloves? His catching was really good, to be fair. That's one thing off wide balls. You do an incredible job of coming up, getting the ball, coming down with it, which is hard for a lot of people to do. And yeah, I think you could see a leader back there. And I think that was the biggest thing that stands out. You want a goalkeeper who can lead, who can be a marshal for his defenders, to organize, to be willing to play aggressively, and he did all of those things. So for Swiderski, this was a good tournament, good for his stock. I mean, I think there's no doubt as for all the players on this team, they're no perfect products. And I think especially as a young goalkeeper, there's always so much growth you can have. And I think for him, the big thing he'll focus on is playing out the back, for example, because there are a few moments where maybe it led to more intense moments than you needed, near turnovers or close calls. But ultimately, if that's the only thing you're looking at a young goalkeeper, you're laughing. That stuff's going to come with time. And some of the things like the way he'd catch the ball with such commanding presence, some of the reflexes, his technique, it was all spot on, and it's led Canada to this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent shot stopper. And I like that you said that. The modern game will require him to be a little bit better with his feet, but time will come. He's still very, very young. I love the fact that he's in Europe. I really do hope he can find a club and remain in Europe. It'll be difficult, especially if he's looking for minutes, but I think this tournament has done nothing but make sure his stock has gone up. Another key takeaway, I think, from the group stage is Oliveri said that this tournament, he felt that this was the strongest offensive group that he's had, and the forwards have definitely chipped in. Morgan, Ciccarelli, Bunbury. Let's talk about the depth of scoring that we've seen throughout this tournament so far. And I mean, let's talk about Bunbury's goal as well. What a goal. dying seconds. I mean, we unfortunately didn't really change anything. We were probably going to finish second regardless, but it was, that what a way to go out of the group stage, picking up that win. And I guess actually they scored technically after if it didn't count. But anyways, regardless, it was an unbelievable goal, beautiful finish. Reminded us a little bit of Ismail Kone's goal in a way, but I think this one was a little bit cleaner. So Alex, how important is it that we have found depth throughout this tournament, especially going in the quarterfinals right now, where we'll talk about it in a bit, but we are going to be down a player at the back. But at least when we're looking at the offense, it looks like we're firing.
Yeah, I agree with Olivier because another thing he said in terms of the attacking group being strong, he said that's something that that Canada's lacked in the past. And I think that's key because watching past U20 tournaments, they've struggled to just have someone who can step up and score in these games. Like that's often been a thing where they're usually defensively pretty sound. That's never really been an issue for these U20 groups. But then when it comes to a win or go home game, who could step up and score? And then that would often be the issue. Whereas I think this Canadian team heading in to the quarterfinal, this must-win quarterfinal to go to a World Cup, you got 4 or 5 guys who you can look at. Because like of those guys who scored, Lopez, Morgan, Chicharelli, Bunbury, you're still talking about like an Umar Diallo who we haven't even seen the best of as a striker who could chip in with the goal. And there's some other attackers as well, like a Jesse Costa potentially could chip in with a goal after a bit of a quiet group stage. Kamani Stewart Baines, right? Andre Dimitru has also got a nice assist on the Bunbury bicycle kick. Like this team has attacking options, and I think that's massive because it doesn't put the pressure on one player, one youngster, which is tough for these kids these age. They can kind of just rotate through that. Okay, if it's Miles Morgan that starts, okay, well, if he doesn't score, at least you have a Chicharelli on the bench. You have a Bunbury on the bench. Or if it's vice versa, if a Chicharelli starts, he's not able to get his goal, someone, a Diallo can come in and kind of spell him. And I think it's led to a nice formula where Lopez can kind of be a bit of a driver of a lot of the play, but then you look around him, he himself doesn't have all the pressure on him to score goals, and that makes a massive, massive difference. Because yeah, I think for Canada to reach the U20 World Cup, they're going to need some moments of magic. They're going to need a guy to step up with the clutch goal, and I think this group legitimately has guys who you can look at will be able to finish a chance if it falls to them.
Absolutely. So now let's focus on the back a little bit where we do have some bad news. Kilmarnock has recalled Ethan Schilt-Brown, which is super disappointing because this is a player that's played all 270 minutes for Canada so far since the tournament does fall outside of a FIFA window. Canada has no choice but to let him go. It's just disappointing considering we are like we talked about, one match away from qualifying for a World
Couldn't
Cup.
wait a few days, Kilmarnock.
And it's not, again, I mean, I hope Schilt-Brown can go in there and fight for a starting role. That's obviously the goal. And it's nice to see that the club wants him and sees maybe how well he's played. And they want, they have a European tie coming up. I feel like it's harsh, especially if he's not going to feature for them. And maybe he will. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But it just seems incredibly harsh to rip him away with one game remaining. Where like if Canada wins, they're in the U20 World Cup, which is a huge deal, and it leaves a big hole at the back because I mean we talked about Zwiderski playing great. The back four were all solid, and we can talk about Schilt-Brown. We can talk about Perlman, Greco Taylor. I thought was fantastic. James Cameron. That back four is really really strong, and all of a sudden you have a big hole in it.
Yeah, like Schilt-Brown is really, if we're going to talk 3 standouts, I think had this news not occurred, we would have had to find a way to put him in because, of course, the 3 standouts, we wanted to pick players that stood out, but also to keep an eye on for this quarterfinal. And I think it's unfortunate that we won't have that opportunity with Schilt-Brown because he was just so solid for a young center back. He would make big tackles, big headers, always a threat in both boxes. Like he just really stepped up as a leader throughout this tournament. And Canada defensively, they needed that because offensively, since they have a bit more of an aggressive setup, Badwell pushing forward, there were a lot of transition moments. You need your defenders to be strong. And Schilt-Brown, I thought, really did a good job of doing that at the back and looked like someone who you'd want on the field in the quarterfinal to lead. But I guess the good news is, as we mentioned, heading into this tournament, Perlman's very experienced. I thought he's had a quietly solid tournament as well. I think he'll step up. And for what it's worth, Perlman got rested in the third game. Emmanuel Math of the Whitecaps stepped in. I thought he had a pretty good game. So I think potentially a Math Perlman partnership can step up and fill collectively the hole left behind by Schilt-Brown. Because no doubt it is a key one.
It is definitely a key one. So, Alex, with the game coming up, knowing how important it is, let's kind of come up with a starting 11 that we would maybe like to see or we think is realistic. So, I'll put one together here and we can talk about a few different areas where we may see some changes. So, obviously, Canada's been playing with their 4-4-2. Swiderski will be the keeper. I got Cameron at right back, Math, Perlman, as you mentioned, probably the two center backs, Greco Taylor at left back. I think right mid is up for debate. I'm not sure if exactly who's going to be, but I mean, Badwall, Biello for sure are the central midfielding pairing. I'm assuming Costa is going to start. Alex, we are debating where to put him. I think the front two is relatively easy. It's Morgan and Lopez. So we have two positions that are really kind of up for grabs. The few players that are going in there. I have a feeling, considering he's your skipper, Costa will be in there. So, Alex, who would you like to see down the right, and who would you like to see down the left, and why?
Yeah, well, I think if we're going to look at some things we learned, I felt like Costa, he struggled to get a bit involved on the right wing. Just didn't really seem natural for him. He's more of a 10. You kind of want him to get inside and combine with a Lopez and a Morgan and a Badwall a bit more. I wonder if it could be worth putting Costa on the left, especially because Greco Taylor was an absolute just workhorse down that left side. He would go forward, get crosses, but he'd also sometimes play almost like a left center back. Like he has that flexibility. That's why he's been getting minutes for Pacific this year and learning from an Eric Lajeunesse there. I think a Costa Greco Taylor partnership could be worth trying just because that'll allow Costa, I think, to drift and play a bit more like a true 10
Yeah.
in possession with Greco Taylor kind of filling in. Lopez as well likes to drift out left. So I think that could benefit Costa. And I think if that ends up happening, it makes sense to throw in Andre Dumitru because he's quietly had some good appearances off the bench. He had the great assist, like mentioned, on the Bunbury goal. He's kind of just brought a bit of something different on that wing. So that's something I could see. But if you do keep Cost on the right, I think you would have to go to Kamani Stewart Baines just because in terms of the way he drives at defenders, the way he gets forward, it can create problems. I think the big key for him will just to be pick his spots a bit better, maybe combine a bit more with the Greco Taylor on the overlap, and open up space in that way. But I think it poses an interesting question. It could be also nice to have a Stuart Baines off the bench too to bring fresh legs and a bit of speed and direct play as well.
Well, with a goal like that, Bunbury maybe down the left-hand side could potentially get the start. A little reward for an incredible performance that he had there late in the match. It's interesting. I mean, the depth is great because we have all this options. But I mean, for me going in this tournament, I think we talked about a little bit that Kamani Stewart Baines was supposed to be one of the most important players on this team, playing for the Colorado Rapids, and we've seen glimpses of it, like you mentioned, Alex, because he's got such energy to his game. He's very direct. He loves taking on defenders, and that's something you want to see in a tricky, fast winger. It's just maybe it's the pitch, maybe he's just overthinking it. It hasn't really come off, and he's been making the wrong decisions, which is why I think there is probably a pretty good chance we will see him start from the bench. But if he can come on and just kind of get it right in the final third, I think he can definitely be a big asset for this Canadian team. And with that being said, it's going to be a fantastic matchup here on One Soccer. Panama, Canada, winner of this quarterfinal will head to the U20 World Cup. It's going to be a tough match. Hopefully you guys are excited and you guys will tune in. Thank you guys so much for watching this preview. If you enjoyed it, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.